Hello everyone! Welcome back again to my channel, Yam Heam Educamix TV 25. Please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much! So now, let's talk about the rise of Filipino nationalism. By the 19th century, the Filipinos united as a nation and campaigned for reforms in the colony. At first, this campaign for reforms was a peaceful one. The peaceful campaign was led by Filipino thinkers and writers like Dr. Rizal and others. They started a propaganda movement in Spain and the Philippines to ask for more freedom and rights. But this movement failed. When Rizal was exiled to the Pitan, Bonifacio and other patriots started a secret organization called the Katipunan. They called for a revolution to make the Philippines free at last. When the people of a nation became united and worked together for common aims, this is called nationalism. Nationalism also means devotion to one's country or fighting for its independence. In the 19th century, Philippine nationalism was born. The Filipinos began to think of themselves as one nation with a common origin, common customs and traditions, common history and destiny, and common aspirations. Also, they wanted to be separated or be independent of Spain. So these are the factors that gave rise to Filipino nationalism. First is spread of liberalism. When the Philippines was open to world trade, modern ideas came from Europe and the United States. These ideas were printed in books and newspapers read by many Filipinos. They thought about freedom and the natural rights of man to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. These same ideas caused the American and French revolutions in the 18th century. Now, the Filipinos learned about them and they became bold enough to ask for government reforms. And the opening of Suez Canal in 1869 made the Philippines closer to the world trade, communications, and travel. More travelers and information came to the Philippines. Next factor that gave rise to Filipino nationalism is the sentiment against the principales. There was a mounting dissatisfaction against the principales or the political and social aristocracy, which includes the prominent land-owning and propertied citizens, accommodated as intermediaries of the Spanish government from the inception of its colonial rule. The masses had been skeptical about the local aristocracy due to their proportion of influence in the society. The Ilocano insurrection in 1815 was a manifestation of the people's cry to mass movement. Next is the racial prejudice. The Spaniards commonly regarded the Filipino natives as belonging to the inferior race and haughtily called them as Indios. The preconceived notion of the Spanish colonizers that the natives could not rise beyond their limited intelligence instigated the enlightened Filipinos to struggle for equality. Jose Rizal's annotation of Antonio de Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas denounced the allegations of the Spaniards that the Filipinos were savages and had no culture prior to the coming of the Western colonizers. Next is cultural changes. The educational reforms of 1863 dramatically improved the standards of education in the primary level. With the implementation of a new educational system, qualified Filipinos were able to pursue higher education. Young men from prosperous Chinese mestizo and native families were able to take up law, medicine, and pharmacy. They were able to see the repressive colonial policies of Spain after being enlightened with liberal ideas, thus giving birth to a new breed of Filipinos, the Ilustrados or the Enlightened Ones. The Ilustrados got the chance to manifest their political will when Carlos Maria de la Torre became a governor-general in 1869. This benevolent governor was able to show his liberal disposition in administering the government after he invoked reforms in the government like the revocation of press censorship and the abolition of flogging as a form of punishment. He even lived simply within his means. Governor de la Torre, as a result, inspired the Filipino middle class to sustain their campaign for reforms in the country. And also, the Spanish Revolution of 1868 overthrew the monarchy and brought in a new government. This new government gave the Filipinos more freedom and rights. The Spanish new Governor-General Carlos Maria de la Torre invited the Filipinos to Malacañang Palace, the official residence of the Governor-General. His pro-Filipino sentiments shocked the other Spaniards who looked down on the Filipinos. Unfortunately, this good colonial government lasted only for 2 years until 1870. The next factor that gave rise to Filipino nationalism is the secularization controversy. Many Filipinos became priests, especially by the 19th century. But they were not given their own parishes because of the racial prejudice of the Spanish priests. So many Filipino priests campaigned for reforms in the Catholic Church. This was called the Secularization controversy. It was led by Father Pedro Pelaez, Jose Burgos, Mariano Gomez, Jacinto Zamora, and others. The secularization controversy transformed into a Filipinization issue since the secular priests were mostly Filipinos. The effort to secularize the parishes in a way heightened the nationalist feeling of the Filipino. In December 1870, Archbishop Martinez wrote to the Spanish regent advocating secularization and mentioned that discrimination against Filipino priests would encourage anti-Spanish sentiments. Next is the Kabati Putini of 1872. In 1870, a new government came to power in Spain and returned dictatorship to the Philippines. The new Governor-General, Rafael de Izquierdo, was a tyrant. He stopped all the reforms of the previous governor, took away the rights and liberty of the Filipinos, and oppressed them. On the night of February 20, 1872, some Filipino soldiers and workers at the Cavite arsenal mutinied. They killed the Spanish officers and captured the fort. But on the following day, they lost in a bloody fight with government troops. Many mutineers were killed. Other patriotic Filipinos were also arrested and tried in military courts. 3 of the most famous victims of the Cavite Mutiny trials were Fathers Jose Burgos, Mariano Gomez, and Jacinto Zamora. Because of their surnames, they are sometimes called Gomborza. They were Filipino priests who had fought for reforms. Now, they were accused of treason to Spain and tried in an unfair trial. Although they were priests, they were strangled to death at the Garrote in Luneta. Their execution was a big scandal in the Philippines at that time. But their martyrdom inspired Filipinos to fight harder for reforms. Next is the propaganda movement. After the martyrdom of Gomborza, conditions in the country went from bad to worse. The Spanish officials oppressed the Filipinos even more. Filipino patriots were persecuted. Many of them fled abroad to Hong Kong, Singapore, Barcelona, Madrid, Paris, London, and other foreign cities. Here, they met and decided to work for the good and happiness of their motherland. The crusade for reforms was a peaceful one. It was done by means of pen and tongue. Great Filipinos wrote articles, books, and pamphlets, and they made speeches to pressure the Spanish government. This peaceful campaign was called the propaganda movement. It began in 1872 after the martyrdom of Gomborza and ended in 1892 after the exile of Rizal to the Pitan. The propagandists were young Filipino in their 20s or 30s. They came from the best, the brightest, and the richest families in the Philippines. They were mostly college students or young professionals. All were men of intelligence, courage, and patriotism. Today, they are known as great Filipino heroes. But at that time, they lived and fought for our freedom. They had to be very brave because they went through great hardships. The Filipino propagandists published their crusade for reforms in fortnightly newspaper called La Solidaridad. It was founded by Graciano Lopez Haina, its first editor. The first issue appeared in Barcelona, Spain on February 15, 1889. In November 1889, it was moved to Madrid, Spain, and the next editor became Marcelo H. del Pilar. Filipino writers like Rizal, Del Pilar, Ponce, and others contributed articles to this newspaper. La Solidaridad bravely championed the Filipino cause in Spain. The Spanish authorities in the Philippines hated it and tried to stop it. Unfortunately, it ended for lack of funds on November 15, 1895. The national hero of the Philippines, Dr. Jose Rizal, was a great lover of his country. In a letter before his death, he wrote, "I have always loved our poor country, and I am sure that I shall love it until my last moment, in case men betray me. My career, my life, my happiness, all I have sacrificed for love of country. Whatever happens, I shall die blessing it and hoping for the day of its freedom." Dr. Jose Rizal also wrote two famous novels, The Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo. He exposed the abuses of the Spanish officials and priests. These novels awakened the Filipinos' love of country and paved the way for the Philippine Revolution of 1896. Although the Spanish officials hated him, Rizal decided to return to the Philippines on June 26, 1892. He founded a political association of patriotic Filipinos to crusade for reforms. This was called La Liga Filipina or the Philippine League. It met for the first time in the house on Elias Street, Tondo on July 3, 1892. On suspicion, he was arrested and sent to exile in Mindanao. He left for the Pitan, Mindanao by ship on midnight of July 14, 1892. Later, Rizal would be shot by a firing squad at the Luneta on December 30, 1896. He was the greatest victim of Spanish injustice and oppression. That's enough, thought Andres Bonifacio after the shocking news of Rizal's exile to the Pitan. He and his friends met at a house on Azcaraga Street, now CM Recto Avenue, Tondo, Manila. On the night of July 7, 1892, they founded a secret revolutionary society for Filipinos to fight for freedom. Its full name was Kataas-Taasan Kagalang-Galangang Katipunan ng mga Anak ng Bayan, or Highest and Most Respectable Society of the Sons of the People. It was called the Katipunan or KKK for short. What are the aims of the Katipunan? So the Katipunan or KKK had two aims. First is to unite the Filipinos into one solid nation, and second is to fight for Philippine independence from Spain. The Katipunan prepared the country for an armed revolution to regain the country's lost freedom. The Katipunan Government. The Katipunan was more than a secret society. It was also a hidden government. Bonifacio and the others wanted it to replace the Spanish government in the Philippines. It had two constitutions, the first one in 1892 and the second one in 1894. The central government was the Supreme Council, Kataas-Taasang Sanggunian, with a president, a fiscal, a secretary, a treasurer, and a comptroller. There were Katipunan chapters in each province and each town. The members paid taxes or contributions to keep it going. The Katipunan also had its own courts and court system. These courts passed judgment on members who disobeyed the secret rules of the society. The first president of the Katipunan was Deodato Arellano. Bonifacio deposed Arellano as president in a meeting in February 1893 because of the latter's inaction. That is why Roman Basa was elected as second president of the Katipunan. However, early in 1895, Bonifacio realized that Roman Basa was as ineffective as Deodato Arellano. that he called a meeting of the society and readily deposed Basa. Bonifacio himself elected as the president of the Katipunan, and the title of the president was changed to Supremo. Bonifacio was Supremo of the Katipunan from 1895 until his death in 1897. The Katipunan spread quickly and attracted many members, especially among the poor oppressed masses. By the time it was found out in 1896, it had about 20,000 members. Some of the famous Katipuneros were Bonifacio, Arellano, Emilio Jacinto, the brain of Katipunan, Dr. Pio Valenzuela, Valentin Diaz, Jose A. Dizon, Ladislao Diwa, and Teodoro Plata. Women also joined and helped the Katipunan. They became suspicious of the activities of their husbands, for example, late-night absences and deductions in their earnings. So the men admitted female family members of other Katipuneros. These were the wives, sisters, and female relatives of male Katipuneros. The female Katipuneros guarded the secret documents of the society. When a secret meeting was being held, they pretended it was a party by singing songs and dancing. They made the Katipunan flag and celebrated the anniversaries of the Katipunan. Among the famous Katipuneras were Gregoria de Jesus, wife of Bonifacio, who was called the Lacambini of the Katipunan, Marina Dizon, Benita Rodriguez, Marta Saldana, Simeona de Remigio, and Macaria Pangilinan. The Katipunan kept its activities secret. If they were caught, the Spanish authorities would surely kill them and punish their families. So they only accepted new members after very secret and solemn rite. A candidate for membership was first blindfolded and entered a secret room. In the room, there was a table with a lamp, a skull, and a bolo. The blindfold was removed from his eyes. He was given a test on the history of the Philippines to show that he knew the Spaniards had oppressed the Filipinos. He had to pass other tests on his patriotism, courage, and sincerity. The ceremony of the blood compact followed the tests. The candidate cut his left arm with a knife. With his own blood, he signed his name on the list of the Katipunan. He also took an oath as follows. In the name of God and my country, I promise to defend with valor and integrity the aims of the Katipunan, to keep its secrets, to obey its orders, to help the members in times of danger and need, to recognize the authority of its leaders and not to be a traitor to its rules. Let's talk about the Katipunan literature. The Katipuneros wrote beautiful and stirring works about their love for our country. They put their deepest feelings into words to show their patriotism and to inspire others. The three writers of the Katipunan were Bonifacio, Jacinto, and Dr. Pio Valenzuela. Bonifacio wrote the Decalogue of the Katipunan. This was a collection of wise sayings for Katipuneros. He also wrote a patriotic poem, Pag-ibig sa Tinubuang Bayan, or Love for Country. Emilio Jacinto was called the brains of the Katipunan because he was its greatest writer. He wrote the Cartilla, the collection of teachings of the Katipunan. Among his patriotic poems was A La Patria, or To Country, written shortly before his death in Laguna in 1897. Dr. Pio Valenzuela helped Bonifacio and Jacinto to edit the Katipunan newspaper. He also wrote patriotic poems and articles, including an essay, Katwiran, or Is It Fair? The Katipunan had a newspaper called Kalayaan, or Freedom. The first and only issue was published in January 1896. About 1,000 copies were printed, but the printing press was found out and no more issues were printed. Next is the Katipunan plot. The Katipuneros held many meetings to plan their uprising against the Spaniards. In a cave at San Mateo, Rizal, on April 10, 1896, Bonifacio, Jacinto, Aurelio Tolentino, Guillermo Masangkay, Faustino Manialac, and others were present. They wrote their signatures on the walls of the cave and their cry, "Long live Philippine independence." Actually, the Katipunan Council leaders set August 29, 1896 as the date of the revolt against Spain. It was agreed that at 7 o'clock on the evening of August 29, the revolt would begin at the gates of Manila. They would then enter Intramuros, killing as many Spanish officials and priors on the way. Next is the discovery of the Katipunan. Before Bonifacio and his men could strike, the plot was discovered. A Katipunero named Teodoro Pateño told his sister Honoraria about the plot because he was afraid for the life of his sister, who lived in the Agustinian orphanage at Mandaluyong. His sister and a Bisayan nun told him to tell everything to Father Mariano Hill, the Spanish parish priest of Tondo. In the evening of August 19, 1896, Pateño saw Father Hill and told him about the secrets of the Katipunan. That same night, Father Hill and government troops went to the office of the press used by the Katipuneros and found out some secret receipts at a printing stone. Father Hill took the news and evidence about the Katipunan plot to the Spanish authorities. Many Filipinos were immediately arrested and put in prison. The city of Manila was thrown into confusion and fear. The news spread quickly that the Katipunan was discovered. Fortunately, many Katipuneros escaped in time. They fled from the city to the hills of Balintawak. Among them was Bonifacio and his men. So that is the history of the rise of Filipino nationalism. I hope naman mayroon na naman kayong natutunan dito sa ating Yam Heam Educamix TV 25. So I'm your teacher May, leaving this message of Harry Hoover. If you have the courage to begin, you have the courage to succeed. So thank you so much!
Till I ain't no more gone.